It's the type of spark that ignites a major conflict. On Thursday night, President Donald Trump ordered a drone strike at Baghdad airport, which claimed the life of Major General Qasem Soleimani, a man widely recognized as Iran's most powerful and unconstrained military commander. The 62-year-old general spearheaded Iranian covert operations in the Middle East and was instrumental in a range of efforts that run counter to US interests. In short, Soleimani was a consequential person, and his death exacerbates the already tense standoff between Iran and the United States. The question now is when, where, and at what scale will the Iranians retaliate? I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Today's episode is made possible by Dashlane, which gives you one safe to store your most valuable passwords, emails, files, payments, etc. This allows you to instantly log into accounts across every platform, device, and operating system. Its user-friendly interface and security is why over 11 million people use Dashlane. Check it out for yourself. Go to dashlane.com/Caspian Report to get a 30-day free trial, or use the promo code Caspian Report to get 10% off the premium account. General Soleimani was a product of his time, a result of the Iran-Iraq war. In the decades following that deadly conflict, he grew from a soldier into a military tactician. He built a name for himself inside and outside Iran, and among his cult following, he is known as the Shadow Commander. He was respected for his patient and calculating policy that strengthened the sphere of influence of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Soleimani's commitment to his country was admired by his allies and denounced by his critics in equal measure. Yet, what all seem to agree on is that no other individual has had similar success in empowering Shia militias in the Levant. Under Soleimani's command, Hezbollah reinforced its hold over Lebanon, while Shia militants organized into credible fighting machines in Iraq and Yemen. At the same time, Soleimani coordinated al-Assad's offensive strategy in Syria and played an essential role in the fight against ISIS. Perhaps most notably, under Soleimani's oversight, the Iranian Quds forces transformed into a formidable faction in terms of finance, politics, and intelligence beyond Iran's territory. It is estimated that the unit currently has up to 280,000 proxy fighters spread across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Afghanistan. For the US government, however, Soleimani was a terrorist operative who was responsible for the deaths of more than 600 American troops since the Iraq War. Immediately following the drone strike, US officials stated that the assassination was a defensive action that stopped an immediate attack. Whether this is true or not is beyond the point. Washington would never have been in this position had it not been for the reckless policy of the presidency. You see, in May 2018, shortly after coming into office, Trump left the Iran nuclear deal and pursued a program of economic sanctions on Iran known as the maximum pressure policy. Iran, meanwhile, responded with restraint. The leadership in Tehran planned to isolate the United States diplomatically and thereby win economic concessions from the European partners in the nuclear deal. Roughly 1 year passed by, but the restraint approach failed to yield any results. And so Iran chose a different plan of approach. Instead of restraint, the Iranians would deliberately, yet deniably, breach the nuclear deal and escalate tensions across the region. In May and June of 2018, there were naval mine attacks against international shipping. Shortly afterwards, a US drone was shot down in the Persian Gulf. Still later, in September 2018, a barrage of missiles struck a major oil processing facility in Saudi Arabia. And most recently, in late December, Shia militants launched rockets at US military bases in northern Iraq, while pro-Iranian militias were attempting to overrun the US embassy in Baghdad. Soleimani orchestrated these recent attacks in Iraq, and the retaliatory US attacks eventually brought him down. So that's basically how we got to the present day situation. The question now is, how will Iran respond? Well, if history is any indication, the Iranians may not rush to retaliate. Instead, they will patiently and carefully craft an attack plan to be executed at a time of their choosing. That said, the decision-making body of the Iranian government is rational and will want to avoid an all-out armed conflict with the United States. With that said, let's go over some of the possibilities for an Iranian counterattack. At the scene of the crime in Iraq, Shia paramilitary units such as the Popular Mobilization Forces will grow in size and reach. Many of these militias have the capacity to act on their own without approval of Tehran. By its very nature, we will see an increase in low-intensity combat, but the Iranians will not necessarily orchestrate these attacks. Elsewhere in Iraq, the national parliament and its lawmakers will come under pressure to eject the remaining American forces from Iraqi soil. Most of the Iraqi public has no love for either Iran or the United States. They mostly want their country back for themselves and fear from becoming a battleground for a wider US-Iran proxy conflict. Should the US be ejected from Iraq, it would greatly complicate the fight against the remnant forces of ISIS. But the repercussions of Soleimani's assassination will go far beyond the territory of Iraq. In Lebanon, Iran's influence through Hezbollah opens a whole batch of retaliatory options against US targets. Hezbollah exercises substantial control over Lebanon, including its capital where high-ranking US military personnel move about. With the death of Soleimani, the American risk in Lebanon will be even more pronounced. Hezbollah operatives are also active in the Syrian battle space, where American forces are stretched thinly. So we could also see low-level skirmishes in Syria. Through Hezbollah, Tehran can also focus on Israeli targets, but this response is less likely. Hezbollah does not want an all-out war with Israel because it would devastate Lebanon. Plus, Trump has already taken credit for killing Soleimani, which places the crosshairs on American targets rather than Israeli ones. If the American-Iranian tit-for-tat continues to escalate, Iran will eventually turn to Saudi Arabia, one of Washington's closest allies, but also the most vulnerable player in the region. Most of the Saudi processing facilities are situated in the east of the country, within the range of Iranian drones and missiles. It's been about 4 months since the attack on the Saudi processing facility, which brought down half of the country's oil production. In that attack, the accuracy of Iranian missiles took the world by surprise, and it has since been assumed that the Iranians purposefully kept the Saudi attack limited and symbolic. To avenge Soleimani, Iranian policymakers could choose to hit the Saudi kingdom once more, but this time more aggressively and destructively. With the IPO of Saudi Aramco, such an attack would result in serious damage control for the Saudis. Other targets in the periphery include Bahrain, which hosts a significant US military force. Last month, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group reported that Iranian naval vessels had harassed it as it was leaving its deployment in the Gulf of Oman. With the death of Soleimani, this could be the new standard procedure. So Iran is likely to resume harassment of commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf and may launch military exercises to disrupt shipping temporarily. Furthermore, in Yemen, the Iranians could encourage the Houthi rebels to attack US allies or commercial interests. The Houthis have an arsenal of missiles and drones, which they have used in the past to carry out attacks in the periphery. Potential targets for the Houthis would include infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, shipping crossing the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and so on. Yet, perhaps the most drastic response the Iranian leadership could make is to accelerate its nuclear program. When Trump withdrew from the nuclear pact in May 2018, Tehran initially acted with restraint. But as patience ran out in the Iranian capital, the Iranians stepped up their enrichment activities at their fortified underground facilities. This happened as recently as November 2019. It is assumed that the country's production of light enriched uranium has increased from 450 grams per day to 5 kilograms per day. That rate of production could harvest more than 1,000 kilograms, enough to achieve breakout as early as April 2020. For reference, breakout is the time needed to enrich uranium into fissile material to produce one nuclear bomb. Iran could do one better and further accelerate its uranium enrichment to reduce the breakout time even more, all in revenge for Soleimani's death. American policymakers, both Republicans and Democrats, have long considered a breakout time of a few months to be a strategic crisis. So if Iran went ahead to accelerate its nuclear program, we will have a political crisis by the summer of 2020. In the larger context, the death of Soleimani will not take away Iran's capabilities, but it will cast a shadow of uncertainty in the Middle East. What had previously been a covert conflict waged by proxies will now steadily come out into the open. Tehran and Washington will ultimately want to avoid an escalation that could ignite a full-blown military conflict. However, each move risks setting off a chain of unpredictable events that could place the belligerents on a collision course towards armed conflict regardless of the intent. Consider for a moment the following. 2020 is election year in the United States, and the American public will render its judgment on Trump's presidency based on his behavior. No leader wants to appear weak, and Trump in particular has built his brand on tough, decisive action. But how will he respond when more Americans are killed or when the Iraqi parliament passes an eviction note? No rational government wants an armed conflict, but domestic affairs has a way of forcing the hand of foreign policy. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Credit goes to our Patreon community for making content like this possible. Check out the links below if you want to learn more. Thank you for watching, and sağ ol.